Hi, I'm Father Jim Forson, and I'd like to offer you some reflections on the gospel of this 32nd Sunday in Ordinary Time. Several years ago, when I was helping teach a class of young children religion, we had an assignment for them to draw a picture of a heart, a human heart, and beneath it with the saying, "Give from your hearts." And then they had to decide on the various things they would give from their hearts, like love or mercy or compassion or forgiveness, things like that. But I'll never forget this one child drew a picture of a heart, and it kind of looked like a broken heart, and there was a crown of thorns around it. And she had misspelled the word heart and had spelled it Heurts. So it read, "Give from your hurts." And that thought, that image, has always stayed with me. Give from your hurts. And that can be such a difficult thing to do. Because when you are hurting, when you are in pain, that can become all-consuming. I remember I've been through a few surgeries that when I came out, even though they had drugs to kind of help with the pain, still, it was so painful. It took over my whole world. A friend of mine is struggling terribly with diabetes right now, and it's just up and down, and he's lost some toes, and his ability to walk is really hampered, and the internal organs are having a tough time, and he's one doctor after the other, and pills, and it's become his whole world. And to give from your hurts in moments like that how? And not just that kind of pain, but emotional pain for that matter. You know, you lose your job and, oh my God, that takes over your world. Or maybe the kind of emotional hurt that comes from someone who's done something cruel to you and the pain is so deep, or a spouse has been unfaithful. And that kind of pain, it's all-consuming. That kind of hurt, we could think of it as our poverty. It is where we are most wanting, where we are most in need. And not just that kind of poverty. Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk, once wrote that true poverty isn't the kind of poverty that can be relieved. If somebody's hungry and you give them food, they no longer are poor of want of food. And if they are in need of shoes and you give them shoes, well, then their poverty has been resolved. According to Merton, true poverty is where you deserve something, or at one point in time had something which has been taken from you and can never be given back, and you can never have it be restored. That is true poverty. A child who deserves to have parents, and one parent has died or has abandoned the family, and now that child who deserved to have parents no longer does, and nothing can take the place of that absent parent. That is true poverty, poverty that cannot be relieved. A child dies. And even if the parents have other children, the presence of those other children doesn't take place of that lost child. Nothing does. Nothing can. That which I once had and deserved perhaps to have, I no longer do, and it can never be replaced. That is true poverty. And so when we find ourselves with that kind of hurt, that kind of poverty, how do you give? Well, Jesus, as usual, shows us how in today's gospel. We see Jesus in the synagogue with his disciples sitting and watching all the people coming and going in the synagogue and making their donations to the synagogue treasury. It's a large receptacle there in the synagogue, and people are making their donations, and naturally the richer people are able to give much larger donations, which can be seen by all the other people in the synagogue, and they're being very generous, and they're rich, and rightly so. But Jesus notices this one poor widow. And the fact that she's a widow means she has no husband, which means that she has no property. She may not have a place to live unless perhaps a child or a relative took her in. Possibly not, because she is a poor widow, and she has only 2 small coins. A tradition now, we call it the widow's mite. Just a little bit of almost nothing. And she is making that contribution to the church, to the synagogue treasury. Now, the temptation for any of us would be to say to her, whoa, 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 hang on. You keep that for yourself. You need that more than the synagogue does. Synagogue's going to take care of itself. You need that to take care of you. And, as a pastor, I've had people say to me, Father, I can't keep giving to the church right now. I lost my job, and we're barely making ends meet, and I feel badly about it. And I say to them, hey, I say to them what any of us would say, don't worry about it, You need, we'll be fine in the church, okay? You need to take care of you and your family. Don't worry about us. But Jesus, he praises that widow who contributes those 2 small coins. And he says to his disciples, she is the most generous one of all, because she has given from her want. What little she had, she's giving from her poverty. And he holds that up as an example of how the disciples were to give and how we are to give. It's easy to give from one's abundance. When I have a lot of something, it's easy to be generous. But when I don't, when I'm deep in my own poverty, the other night I was coming out of a store, and this young man with a backpack on, dark at night, comes up to me and says, hey, you got any loose change? And I was kind of taken aback a little bit. I was kind of nervous. He was a big guy, and it was dark, and I didn't want to deal with this. And so I just kind of blew him off. And I just said, no, I haven't got anything. And I just walked right by him and got in my car and drove away. But as I was driving away, I felt badly because, in fact, I did have loose change. And I hesitate to give money because you just don't know how it's going to be used. But Scripture says, give to the poor man when he begs. It doesn't say, so long as he is deserving of money. It doesn't say that. I'm not the one to decide the deserving from the undeserving poor. I'm not the one to judge how it's going to be used. Scripture just says, give to the poor man when he begs. And I didn't. I was in my own poverty at the time, of fear, of uncertainty, of judgment. And now I wish I had given from my poverty. Today, Jesus calls us all to follow the example of that widow and to give from that part of our lives where we are most poor. To the person who has wounded us deeply, we give forgiveness. Even if they don't deserve it, we give it, as hard as that may be to do. Or to the person who is demanding more and more and more, and I barely have any time for myself, to give of our time where I am most wanting. Or even some guy outside the store who asks, got any loose change? To give from our wants, to give from our poverty, to be as was that widow, foolishly generous. Today, may what guides us be the picture of that almost broken heart with a crown of thorns, with those prophetic words, give from your hurts.